joining us for this month's episode of This Is My Story. In this podcast, we will sit down and talk to someone who has a powerful story of transformation because of what Jesus did in their life.
My name is Austin Vanover, and this is my story.
Well, hey, we're so excited to have Austin Vanover here today with us, and this is my story podcast. Man, it's been amazing just to get to know you. And I know my first interaction with you was at the well. It was before redemption, and you had been around a little bit. Mm-hmm. We just hadn't had that opportunity to sit down yet. And so I remember we sat down because we were there pretty early before service, and man, we just began to talk. And I was like, man, what's your story, right? Mm-hmm. And we all have a story, and that's what this podcast is about, telling our story, man, because our story tells God's story. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
And so as we sat down that night, I just heard your humility in your heart, and I just knew that, man, God has just brought you through so much. But at that point in time, you were really at the beginning stages of being sober, and then just really just embracing that calling that God has upon your life. And so I remember having a really good conversation with you, but then I would just kind of see, like, okay, because a lot of people come through that door, right? So, I kind of throw out this, terminology. I saw it from another pastor. You have Sexy Steve and then Steady Eddie, right?
Right.
Sexy Steve looks good, sounds good, but you can't rely on Sexy Steve, right? Steady Eddie is the one day in and day out, man. They are faithful. And, you had the Sexy Steve look, right? And, but it's like, listen, a lot of people can do that, but it's like, will you be steady? And as you told me your story, and we'll get to that here in a bit, I knew it'd be a test to see, will this guy go through the hoops? So it didn't take long for Austin to begin to be steady, because it was 5:30 a.m., correct me if I'm wrong, if not earlier, on Sunday mornings. There you were at the well, just wiping tables for free, right? We weren't paying you a dime, right?
No.
And man, you were just wiping tables. But I remember at first, I glanced at you, but I didn't acknowledge it too much, because I'm like, listen, a lot of people start strong. A lot of people are like, oh, look at me right now, give me the microphone, right? So I'm like, we'll see you in about a month, where he's at. A month later, there he is.
Just kept coming
Wiping
before
tables,
we got
right?
to church. It was crazy.
And I was like, all right, that's something, And so, man, I saw that humility, man. I saw that passion for God and His church, and man, you just wanted to serve. And so I knew right then, I'm like, if this guy will stay faithful, right, and be steady, right? You can be Sexy Steve and Steady Eddie, right? But if you can do that, man, God would just have an amazing plan for your life. And just, if you would humble yourself, man, I just knew that God would exalt you, right? Humble ourselves, and man, God will exalt us in the right time. And man, here we are today, and God has just used you, man. And I know you've been a huge blessing in Madi and I's life. If I know I have some big stuff coming up, or if Maddie has some big stuff coming up in the ministry, I text you, and I'm like, hey, will you pray for me? Because I know you're a man of prayer. And so, man, before we get started, I just want to tell you, man, we love you, and we believe in you, man. We're so proud of you, and excited that you are about to get married, right? Such an amazing thing, And so, but man, thanks for being here with us today. And, you're living with one of my best friends right now, right? Jason Cruz. And so what's that been like, living with old Cruiser?
Oh, man, it's been a blessing. I mean, going in there, I did not know how to live just like, naturally living,
Yeah.
And he's taught me a lot about responsibility and just structure of life. And
that's awesome.
it's been a blessing, and we've made a bond and a pack, and we're best buds now.
That's awesome.
That's good.
We help each other,
Right.
So.
Teaching a little boxing here and there,
Yeah,
right?
he's taught me how to punch,
He's a good dude, man. I love it.
That's awesome.
And I know, Maddie, you were in life group a while back
Yes.
with your soon-to-be wife, Dasha,
Like
right?
4 years ago, so I've known her for a long time.
Yeah,
so.
such a sweetheart.
Yeah.
She is. I love her.
You're
She's
right.
awesome.
This is for you, babe, right? That's what you say, right?
This is for you, Dasha.
There you go, man. There you go. But man, a lot of people have heard your story, but a lot of people haven't.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, they know Austin, that deep voice, right? And you've been a leader, but before you were a leader, before anything like that, you were just a kid. Just a kid on the street, just doing, their own thing and all that. And so, man, just give us some insight on that. Like, what was your childhood like?
Yeah, man, growing up, I was raised by my dad, Todd Vanover. He's a good dad, also was raised by my stepmother, for, probably the first 10 years of, 10, 12 years of my life. She was in there, I had 2 step siblings as well, and a younger sibling. My blood brother, his name's Cody Ray Vanover, and then I had a stepbrother and a stepsister. His name was Cody too. We called him Cody Allen, and then we had Cody Ray, and then Chelsea was my stepsister. So we grown up. There was a lot. It was a lot of entertainment in the house. There's 4 of us running around, and of course, I grew up in Charleston, Missouri. I don't know if you guys know where that's at, but we call it the Boot Hill, back in the Boot Hill, southeast Missouri. And the environment there is was quite different. It was infested with drugs. I mean, that's everywhere you go.
Right.
There's a town that has full of drugs, but this one was gangs all around it. And a lot of drug activity. And so before I get into all that, my childhood, my mother was absent out of my life. So, my mom's name's Stephanie. I mean, God bless her soul. God's doing amazing things today. But at that moment, when I was a child, she was absent, out of me and my brother's lives. And, my dad was left to take care of me. And, of course, he worked at night. So my stepmother ended up taking care of me, taking care of us for a while. But then they got a divorce, as a young child. So, I was 11 or 12 when my dad and stepmother got a divorce. So there goes our lives upside down again, But growing up in that style of life, it threw me for a loop. I didn't feel, I didn't never feel at home anywhere. I was always wondering what was next. There's a lot of things that I'd seen, a lot of things that I felt as a kid. I dealt with a lot of abandonment issues. Honestly.
You're just surviving.
Yeah, I was just surviving. I wouldn't say that I was really in a impoverished family or nothing like that. Like, I was provided for, but as far as like the affection and love and stuff that kids long for, that was absent.
That's right. Yeah, it's real, man.
In the back of my head, I'm looking for mom. I want mom, and dad was gone at work a lot. He tried doing what he could, providing for us, and so as a kid, I can't, it wasn't all bad. My dad, he took us in, there's a lot of adventures, man. We was in the river a lot, that was one of my favorite things to do. That's still awesome. Is, he took us floating, we grew up with 4-wheelers and motorcycles, and he was always an adventure, and
so you had some good memories.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, man. We had fun times, and Dad, he tried to make sure that, he did a lot for us, when he had time with us, he made sure that he was spending some time with the boys.
Right.
So
how old were you when you, first met your mom?
Well, when I first met my mom, well, I was my real mom.
Yeah, your real mom.
So, I mean, of course, she was there at the beginning of, like the first few years. And then, she went off and was doing her own thing, with drugs and just that
she
lifestyle.
Just was absent a little bit.
She left, man. And, we would go years without seeing my mother, We would go long times without seeing my mom. She'd pop up on a birthday every once in a while, she would call and say she was coming and never come, It was, and then the times that we was with her, she, we was in some crazy places, just, I'd find drugs and, I was really mischievous at a young age. I was, curious and I would find stuff, and I had a good intuition as a young child. I knew that there was something wrong, but, mom, I couldn't remember like the exact age that I remember. Like,
it was just more so she was just kind of in your life and out of your life.
In and out, yeah. It wasn't like it was any time like, I met her. It's like more like she was just in and out, in and out. Yeah.
Oh, that's and that's where that abandonment stuff comes from, right? I like to say the people that are in the positions in your life to love you the most are also in the position to hurt you the most, you know? And because it just hurts more when, hey, mom and dad are supposed to do this and then they don't, man, it really, makes a struggle on the inside, And then all of a sudden you have your stepmom who really played mom in your life. Yeah. And so when your stepmom and your dad separated, what was that like? Did you continue to live with your dad?
Of course. Dad snatched us out, what I mean? So, let's be honest, you're hearing all this, chaos of what's going on, abandonment, neglect, all that stuff that's going on here. There's addiction, man. My dad was an alcoholic. Me and my dad drank a lot. And my stepmother, she was a school teacher, right? And, dude, she got on meth too. Like, I would remember my mom coming over, and my mom would come see me, and they would end up in the basement for, 3 days, not even come see us. And they're down there getting high together, my mom and stepmom. And eventually, some stuff happened with my stepmother and my dad, it just, with the alcohol and the drug use, I'm sure my dad wasn't a saint either. I'm sure he was indulging in it too, and it broke. It finally broke, and they separated. So man, I was scarred. Like, I loved my stepmother dearly. I mean, she taught me a lot, man. A lot of my intelligence I have today, like with math and just reading and writing, and just I'm pretty intelligent, know. And she played a big role in that. She worked with me, and so whenever she was out of my life, I was hurt about it. My younger brother Cody, he was ready to go. He was ready to go with dad and go stay with grandma and stuff like that. But me, I was it hurt me because I loved my stepmother. I truly did. And just to see my dad go through this, he played dad and like everything was okay, but inside, I'd still, at a young age, I seen that he was hurting,
How old do you think you were when?
I was 12, 11, 12, in that age, And I had just, like, right before all that stuff took place, like, I was curious, and I had began finding their drugs and stuff like that, and, I would steal their weed and stuff like that, and I'd smoke it. Like, I started using drugs at the age of 11, so before I even left, I had already started using.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
do you think they knew, like they
did
were
not
aware of it?
They wasn't aware of it. They knew that I smoked because, I think that they knew that I struggled with smoking cigarettes and stuff. I was just stuff was going on at home. You know what I mean? I was rebellion. I was violent. I'd fight my friends. I'd fight people, and smoke cigarettes.
I mean, because, like, sometimes people are just trying to be cool. And then sometimes you're just, accustomed to your environment, right? And, same with me, like, you think you're cool, but at the same time, that's all you know. You just start doing that, And so you talked about, being this terrible environment around you outside the home, but then inside the home, it's there as well. So you're surrounded by it. You're a product of your environment right then, And so at 11, you start using drugs. What was that like? Like, your friend group, like, what were they like? And then your family, didn't really know that you were using, but they were in their own dysfunction, so they didn't really care even. What was that like, man?
So I was probably like the bad influence growing up. So, I had a lot of, like, I grew up with a lot of the kids from across the tracks and the projects and stuff. I went to school with them, and I was I didn't care what race you were, what you looked like, where you come from. You was my friend, we was friends, you know. And I hung out with the kids from across the tracks, And that's kind of, with their brothers, their older brothers and stuff, having the drugs, the weed. Like, I just, that's. I started, smoking with them, know, and got tied in with them, and then I started bringing it to the kids from back in the suburbs, the suburban area, and we was all just using it. And at the time, like, it was just,
they got money to afford it.
They had money, stealing $20 out of their mom's wallet,
It's real. It's real.
But that's kind of what took place there.
What was it like going to school? Because everywhere you go, you're surrounded by this darkness, essentially, right? Drugs, violence, and all that. And then you go to school. What was your experience? Was it good? Like, was that an outlet for you, or was it just bad?
Dude, school, like, in the beginning, it was cool, what I mean? But, like, when I hit middle school, and then, like, people knew that my stepmom, they had a lot of the kids I went to school with had my stepmom in school with them.
Right.
You know what I mean? Went to her class, and, like, after my parents separated, dude, I was just, like, I was fed up with school. You know what I mean? I didn't care no more. Like, I just, I was going to school high. I was getting drunk. You know what I mean? I'd steal my dad's liquor out of the cabinet before school, getting drunk, and high before school and during school. And I was just drowning it out. I didn't want to be there, and got in a lot of trouble at school.
Right.
I was always in trouble there at the end. Like elementary and stuff, I was cool. You know what I mean? I might have got a spanking every once in a while, but
Right.
like I hit middle school and I started being the class clown.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It showed that there was some very bad. I was showing some bad characteristics
Right.
of like there was something going on in my life, and I was violent. I was using drugs. Got caught with drugs at school.
Right.
All kinds of stuff, man. So school just like it was a bad place for me. Like
Right.
you
You got that pain in you. Because I remember me, and I'm not trying to speak for you, but I remember you go to school and you have a bad reputation already and you've caused it. But man, people don't see what's going on inside, right? And so then when a teacher, someone else just kind of lashes out on you, you lash out in return, and I'm not blaming anyone else, but it is hard to, you're trying to do algebra, and then you go home and your parents are high, or they're not there. You don't know if they're going to pick you up. It's hard to do life, And so, as you got older in your adolescent years and then teen years, I mean, I'm sure the drugs just continued to evolve, And so then, did you end up dropping out? Did you finish school? What was that like?
So this is where my story,
after?
this is where the pivoting point goes. Like, you know what I mean? It was like, I'm having fun with
Right.
weed and,
Right.
experimenting with alcohol and, it's fun. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I'm staying the night with friends and,
Right.
it's all
Being
fun.
a hellion.
Yeah, it
Right.
was cool. Like I was
Right.
having fun with it there at the beginning. 11, I just thought it was cool. I was being a
Right.
bad kid. and
Right.
I thought that was what was fun,
Yeah.
And
Right.
Anyway, so going into high school was like a pivoting point. So at the age of 14, I started using methamphetamines.
Wow.
Yeah, I started using methamphetamines. I didn't make it past the 9th grade. And I want to just give you a little bit more background. So my dad and stepmom got the divorce. So here we are. My dad is left to take care of me and my brother, right? And my brother goes and he stays with my grandma. Me, I love my dad. You know what I mean? I'm not leaving my dad's side.
Right.
You know what I mean? It didn't matter where, I'm staying with dad no
Right.
matter what. Well, staying with dad required he worked nights. So, for the week, he's gone at nighttime. I'm having to do my own laundry. I'm having to make my own
Right.
food or go to grandma's for food. I'm having to get myself up in the morning for school. There was literally no supervision at
Right.
home.
Right.
And dad didn't have no choice. He had to provide a roof over our head. And, there wasn't stepmom there no more. You know what I mean? He was broken, just went through divorce. And here I am. Now I'm finding my comfort and my security inside the community, and that's when the meth kicked in. You know what I mean? The people in my town, I started hanging out with the older group. You know what I mean? I'm 14 and I'm hanging out with people in their 20s.
Right.
You know what I mean? And they're all addicted to meth, manufacturing methamphetamines, and that's what I did.
Right.
So
Dude, I want to insert this, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you didn't, even though you had the family, the structure wasn't there. And then you have these older people who obviously are bad influences on you, but they feel like family a little bit.
it felt like family.
Would you say a part of that? I mean, obviously, the drugs are addicting and all that, but do you think you felt validated just having these people think you're cool, man, they love you, and as you stated earlier, man, you didn't feel loved, you didn't feel supported, and now these people, they're like, hey, what's up, Austin? You want to be with us? Then you feel like you have this community. Would you say that's true?
No, it's absolutely true. Yeah. And, still to this day, I still talk to, a couple of them guys that was in my life. They're not doing the greatest, but they're still a part of my life.
Right.
You know what I mean? They was there in some of the darkest moments in my life. And I still have hope that there's, new life for them too as
Absolutely.
well. Just like for me. But I found my security in them, dude.
Yeah.
I found, they was a community for me.
Right.
If I was having a hard day, hey, I go get high with them. Everything's good, and they give me a place to stay when I felt alone. I always had somebody to be around. When you're 14, 15 years old, whether you want to say it or not, a lot of kids, I just want to get out of the house. I wanted somebody around. I didn't have that,
Right.
and
Right.
Makes sense. Man. It
yeah,
really does.
it was by the age of 16, I had got my license, and within like a month or two, I got minor possession, driving and drinking, and I got caught with drugs at school. got assault charge, and they're sending me off to prison, at the age of 16. So I got kicked out of all Missouri schools, and I'm stuck in this boys' prison, and I'm getting my GED in there. So, like, in my head, I was already bad, like learning how to manufacture meth. I've learned all that stuff, and like in my head, I'm like, I'm just going to do my time, and I'm going to get out. Well, during that time, I was like, I need to get my GED, I need to get it now while I have the time. I had some kind of smarts, like I was putting it together in my head, like if I get it now, I ain't got to worry about when I get out.
Right.
So that's what I did. I graduated at the age of 16, got my GED.
Wow.
And by the end of that stint in the boys' home, I was trying, like they had been trying to influence me to make different choices and stuff like that. And they was talking about the military, right? And, I had that thought. I went and took my ASVAB test and went past it. I was 17 years old. I got out on my 17th birthday of the boys' home. They emancipated me. And I got out, and that first week out, I was like, I got to go now, or I'm going to be back in the streets, And I was fearful for that. I knew, like, I had that choice. Like, if I don't get help now, I'm going to go. Well, I went up there. I got to St. Louis with my bags packed, ready to go. And they told me that I had to have my dad's consent, because it was still 17. At that time, 17 was the legal, you had to have your parents' consent to go to the military. Well, I had to go back. Everybody else was sent off, that passed their tests. They was going on straight to boot camp. And, I got sent back. I was the only one that went back. And within that, I was supposed to get my dad's consent and go back. Well, within a week's time, guys, I was back using methamphetamines.
Right.
And, I was just like, this is what I want. This is how I want to live. So, I got into the women, the drugs, the money. It was all fun again for a while, So
you've been sober a little bit.
Then
you got the freedom, and then you're like, granted, because like you said, you made that decision, but why do you think so many people, struggle, to stay sober? Just because the drugs are just so powerful? Do you think it was just your mindset? Because God wasn't really God was absent in your life at that point in time.
Yeah,
right?
I didn't grow up, like my grandma went to church, but like my dad and me, we didn't go up to church. We didn't grow up praying. We didn't grow up reading. That just wasn't part of our tradition, And anyways, I think that, it's more of like the mentality that's instilled in everybody about the drugs. And the drugs are powerful, but more or less it's something to do on the inside.
Right.
Void.
It's a void that's missing, which is Jesus Christ.
Right.
We all know that. But like at that moment we didn't. I think people struggle because they're broken inside, and that's their outlet. That's what they use to cover up the pain, to cover up the hurt, And
so when you were at that point of your life, did you ever read the Bible? Did you, like, when you were locked up, did you ever seek that out? You're just kind of like, okay, when I get out, I'll do this and this and this, kind of being self-reliant, really.
Yeah.
And so then once you kept using and stuff like that, I'm sure that was kind of a downfall. Did you end up getting in trouble again, or did you run the streets there for a while? What was that like?
I got smarter. You know what I mean? Like, I got smarter with, like, I'm not going back to prison. You know what I mean? I got smarter with it. So, like, I was really, like, I did things differently, and, man, I went on for a good 5 years without any trouble, but I ran from the police. I was really, I had discernment then, as even in the world, I had discernment. I think that was God back then. I just didn't know it. I always had intuition when something would, was about to go down or go wrong, and I'd jump out of it for a little bit. And but at that time, dude, my mentality was like, I do not care. Like, this is what I want. This is how I want to live. I love getting high. I love women. I love the lifestyle that this brings me. And I didn't care about the consequences. I didn't care what happened to me or you. This is what I'm doing, and I was hell on wheels.
Right.
And
where'd it lead you to?
It led me into a dark place, dude. So, there at the end, I'm cooking meth like all the time, getting caught cooking in my dad's house, dude. My addiction got from like, okay, it's about the money, it's about the women, to like, I'm sustaining myself right now. Like,
Right.
I'm sick. I'm mentally, physically, and spiritually sick.
Right.
And I was in the darkest place my whole life, Dylan. I began to use heroin at the age of, I was like 18 years old. I got addicted to pain pills and, heroin.
Anything. it
Yeah,
sounds
dude,
like.
I did every drug. Like, literally, I experimented with every drug. You name it: ecstasy, crack cocaine, heroin, meth, DMT, psychedelic. You name it, I did it.
Right.
And it did, like, when I did stuff, I did it till I could not do it. I overdosed a bunch of times, dude. I couldn't even tell you, really, truly how many times I was in the hospital, in between, anywhere between 5 and 10 times I was hospitalized for my addiction. And I went into a place that was dark, dude, and that heroin, when I got on it, like, I was literally sick. Like, I was just maintaining. I was of course addicted to meth too, and at this time I began to be a thief. I was a thief, a drug dealer. I was getting kids addicted to drugs, 14-year-old kids, like myself once was, I mean, I'm handing that tradition down, and at the time I didn't think of it. Now I can meditate on it. It's like, dude, that was wrong.
But at that point in time, you're just, dude, I mean, you're surviving, and this is your habit, and anything that gets in the way of that has to go away.
Has to go away.
Yeah, but if people are willing to be a part, why not?
Right.
Because when you're living for the world, man, what moral standards do you have? And somebody might be thinking, well, couldn't he see that? Or why would he do that? You don't, man. My little brother's mom was on the podcast a while back, and she talked about, she thought as long as she didn't do cocaine like her mom, she was fine.
Right.
She did every other drug for the longest time. And she's like, well, I'm not like my mom, I'm doing fine. But man, was still a drug addict. And it's just crazy how Satan can just use these lies, to just kind of form the way that we begin to live and behave.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not just drugs, anything. But man,
anything.
Here we are with your story. That was what was the reality. And so did you end up getting locked up? What happened?
Yeah.
there?
So, man, I went on that binge for about 4 or 5 years. I mean, it was just Dylan, no lie, like, I woke up, like, if I slept, there'd be times I'd stay up for a month at a time, but I went on this bench for 3 or 4 years. I used drugs every single day of my life, and I used anything that I could get my hands on. And eventually I got, dude, it started being a domino. When I started getting in trouble, it was like boom, boom, boom. It did not stop. I started getting DWIs. I stole my grandpa's vehicle, my grandpa's Jeep Cherokee. I stole it one night, and I went to a party in the hood in Charleston, Missouri, and I was on my way back, and I got pulled over, got my first DWI in a stolen vehicle.
That's not good.
Yeah, that wasn't good.
Yeah.
And then, here I am I'm going, waiting to go to court. I missed my court date, and I have a warrant out for my arrest, and I get another DWI, right? I get pulled over by the state troopers, I'm leaving a party in Sykeston, Missouri, and I'm heading to Charleston, and I run out of gas on the side of the interstate. I don't want to get too descriptive, but anyways, long story short, this state trooper puts me in his car. Somehow I get out of this vehicle and take off running, and I had drugs and stuff on me, and I run from this cop, and anyways, I go to jail that time. The first one, they let me out, 12-hour hold, they let me out. This one, they kept me in there for a while. They're looking for evidence, I'm running from the police. Anyways, I'm in jail. Well, while I'm in jail, this is where this changed. I'm about 21 years old at this time. While I'm in jail, my mom sends me a letter talking about how her life has changed. And all through the time, I just want to go back just a little bit so we don't miss. Me and my mom would use periodically together. You know what I mean? We was around the same circles. You know what I mean?
Your biological mom.
My biological
so you guys kind of
mom.
reunited.
Yeah, like we were reunited around 16, something like that. She started coming around more, like, and I think that just sometimes with me already being in that kind of gave me the leeway to come. I don't think that she would have ever come around me if I wasn't already in that lifestyle. Does that make sense? I think that a lot of my mom stayed away because she was protecting us. Whether that sounds right or not, I think that's the truth. You know what I mean?
That was her way of doing it.
That's her way, and anyways, yeah. So while I'm in jail, she writes me a letter talking about how she got saved, you know, and I'm like, okay, yeah, okay,
Right.
yeah,
How did that make you feel? Because, you know, this is an interesting topic because I've talked to many people about that where they've went through hell and back with their family, and then all of a sudden one of the family members makes a change, and then, you know, so we as Christians, we know the gospel message now, right?
Yeah.
But if you're not a Christian, you're like, oh, so now you're
Now,
good, right?
yeah, of all times
your entire
now.
life you're gone. You know, in my life, and then you get saved, right?
yeah.
And then you're just supposed to deal with it because we're as Christ, or if we're not a Christ follower, we don't understand that,
Right.
you know. So what was that like for you?
Dude, I didn't believe it. You know what I mean? Like,
Did it make you mad?
yeah, because she kind of held it over my head. You know, like she knew that I was about to get out of jail, and she knew that I needed a place to go.
Right.
'Cause my dad, my grandma, and them, because I stole my grandpa's vehicle just a month prior to that, and they're like, "We're done with you, dude.
Right.
Stay away."
Right.
You know, and I had just got caught. My younger brother Cody caught me cooking meth in my dad's house. So he was like, that my whole family was fed up with me. You know what I mean? And needless to say, my mom used that at that
Right.
time, like, okay, you know, you need a place to stay. Well, you got to go to church.
Right.
So, but little does she know at that time, I'm still the master manipulator. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Master manipulator. And in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm listening to you.
Right.
You know, I'm hearing what you have to say, but I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
gonna go to church with you, so I have a place to stay.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But I did that for a while.
Right.
Dylan. I you know, ran through the hoops. I'm getting high in church. Like I'm going to the bathroom and getting high in church.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I'm nodded out in the middle
Right.
of service, and I'm like, "Amen." You know?
Right. Whatever. You're trying to blend in.
Yeah,
man.
I'm trying to blend in.
Right.
You know.
It's like you're real filled with the Spirit. That's
Yeah, but little did I know that there's people like my grandma was a praying woman. You know what I mean? My nanny, God bless her, so she prayed over me, man, through some hard times in my life, and I believe that God, you know, was answering her prayers
Right.
little at a time. You know, all leading up to this point in my life here, and I know that my mom was praying over me at that time. There's a lot of people praying over me, and
Yeah.
while I'm sitting there in the church high, there's people praying on me like, "You ain't
not the
fooling
way
us,
it's
Austin.
supposed to
You
be,
high as
though."
a kite. We know it too."
Yeah, right. You're not hiding anything.
Yeah, I know.
God's out there just shaking his head like, man.
So I did that, Dylan. I played the role, dude. I was, you know, had a place to go and stay and lay my head. And one night I felt this just gut feeling like something was bad. You ever get that gut feeling like something bad is about to happen? And dude, this is the pivoting point of my life. This is we went to a church service, and we got back, and you know, I was outside smoking a joint, right? After church, smoking a joint. Doesn't make sense, right?
Love it.
But I was doing it.
Yeah.
So and I was outside and I was smoking, and I got this terrible gut feeling like something bad was happening. I'm like, what is wrong? I've been smoking this stuff for 12 years, and I've never felt this way.
Right.
You know, what is going on? And at that moment, I felt the Holy Spirit say to me, this is me, son. I'm asking you to change he's calling me to change my life. And
You thought you were having a bad trip.
I thought I was having a bad trip. Yeah. Well, at that moment, you know, I prayed. I was still addicted to heroin. You know, the meth really wasn't so much in my life at that time. It was just more like I'm sustaining off the heroin sick, you know, and smoking weed, and just that was a mess. But anyways, at that moment, you know, my life was complete chaos. Like I didn't have nothing. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a home to stay in. You know, I'm living with my mom at the age of 21. You know, I don't have a career. Nobody wants me around. I just got out of jail.
Right.
Dude, I'm a sick person, you know what I mean? Didn't have no clothes, you know, just struggling at your worst, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I prayed for my very first time that night, Dylan. I prayed. I said, Lord, if you're real, you'll take this heroin addiction from me.
Yeah.
You'll help me find a job, and you will, and and you'll send me at that time. Come on, at that time in my life, I was like, I gotta have a woman too. So I prayed for a woman too.
Right.
I did. That's just being honest.
Right.
I prayed for a woman. I was
Yeah.
like, you'll send me a woman too, a godly woman. And
Right.
dude, God started from that next day. I woke up. I was not sick at all. Like, and I did not have a desire to touch heroin, and I haven't since that day.
Which is a miracle.
Yeah,
It is a miracle.
2011. You know, I've been clean
amazing.
from that drug. You know, God delivered me in that moment. And when He took that from me, when I woke up and I was not sick or desiring heroin, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that God was real.
Wow.
Because people who aren't familiar with that, I mean, people get so dope sick. They get so
dope
they
sick.
just have a hard time of, just cooperating with life. And there you wake up, at that point in time, you knew God was real, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's
I knew
amazing.
that He was real. So check this out. So after that, like, I went and I applied for a job, dude. I was dirty. Like, we was still in my system. I applied for a job. They gave me a drug test at Lowe's. They called me and said I passed the drug test, and they gave me the job there. And then I met my ex-wife, there at Lowe's, she was a pastor's daughter. Right. And that's when, the Christianity stage started taking place in my life.
That's good. Well, powerful story.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect, leeway into, so, you talked about ex-wife, but at that point in time, you got saved, you meet this girl who's a daughter of a pastor.
Yeah.
What was that like? What's that next season of your life
So
like?
that leads me into ministry. You know what I mean? Like, her dad's a pastor. You know what I mean? I got this crazy story about, from drug life to being saved, and my life. Everything's coming together. I'm working. I'm cleaning up. I'm looking real good.
Right.
Anyways, I'm in church, and dude, I'm like, I was on fire.
Right.
People get on fire. They're going everywhere. And that was me. I was going to every time the church doors were open. I'm in it.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm going to every revival there was. I'm going to every service that I could get my hands on. And it seemed like to me, Dylan, that, and this is God's honest truth, every service that I go to, I was having somebody prophesy about me being called to preach. And I'm like, dude, I was just cooking dope a month ago. I'm not a preacher, and eventually, like, enough had been said, that I started believing it. And one night in particular, I was at a service, and my ex-father-in-law was there with me, and he had been telling me that the Lord was telling him some stuff about me, and it wasn't time yet, being patient with it, giving me the right time to tell me the word. And that a pastor come up to me, was like, hey, you're called into this ministry, and it's time. And he come up and confirmed it. He's like, I've been waiting for, because he had never heard, other people confirm that prophetic word of me, being called into ministry or anything. Right. But at that moment, he realized it, and then they kind of, it started there. I started preaching a little bit, 5-10 minute sermons on Sunday nights, you know what I mean? And it just started growing from there. I become the youth pastor at the church, growing in the ministry, learning how to speak, learning how to, be a Christian somewhat, in some sense. And at that time though, Dylan, my view of Christianity was distorted. I didn't understand what it was like. I didn't feel convicted that I still smoked cigarettes. I didn't feel convicted that, just the certain things that I had in my life that I wasn't letting go of, and I wasn't going to let go of them at that time. I didn't want to let go of them, and
like, I'm not on heroin anymore.
Yeah, like my life was cool. You know what I mean? I'm working. You know what I mean? I justified it, and here I am. I mean, God still used me in my brokenness. He still used me in the moments. That I was in youth ministry for several years. Me and my ex-wife, and
when did you end up getting married? Around that same time?
Yeah, it was very fast. It was quick. 6 months after meeting her, we were married. 2012.
I want to pause and get your opinion on this. So you get saved, get sober, you essentially get thrown into the ministry. Not saying that God didn't use you, but within that, Maddie and I were talking about this the other day. Like, sometimes, and I'm not blaming any pastor or church, but you see these great leaders who are potential leaders, and we oftentimes throw them into leadership without that discipleship process. Do you feel like and granted, I'm not blaming anyone, but do you feel like you being thrown into the ministry so fast was something that really kind of, slowed down your spiritual growth process, which I
Yeah.
know sounds ironic, but does that make sense?
So I'm not bashing nobody, you know what I mean? I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah.
But for me, if I, me being in leadership today, if I know that somebody has never been a Christian before in their life, has never even walked, church life out, and that they don't really know how to be a Christian, I think that there should be a process of following in order for them to get put behind a pulpit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that was very damaging for me and a lot of other people.
Bible talks about that.
Yeah, we learned a lesson. I think I learned a lesson from it, and
Right.
I'm sure that my father-in-law and other people had learned a lesson that you don't just put anybody behind the pulpit.
Right.
Even though I had the gift to speak, I had the voice to speak, I had to look. You know what I mean?
It doesn't mean that you didn't have the calling.
I didn't.
Right.
It just
but it
was
just
not
wasn't
time.
exactly.
I was not taught how to be a Christian. I wasn't taught that you have to walk through process and you have to get rid of all these things. Like, yeah, you're telling me they're bad, but how do I get rid of them?
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Well,
Yeah.
somebody was supposed to walk me through it, and they didn't. And I think that eventually led to my downfall in early ministry. I don't count it a complete
God still used
God
you.
Right.
still using, and He's
Definitely.
still using my past
Right.
today.
Yeah.
Like I learned so
But
much.
the
through it.
reality of it is, and that's why I appreciate your honesty. You know,
Yeah.
when you're open, because people need to hear this.
Yeah.
And it might. I mean, you're very open and vulnerable, but it might even feel uncomfortable talking about it. But dude, I want you to break down what took place, because I think people need to hear this, where they're like, "Here I am, send me." And like I tell Maddie, just because we get, or not just Maddie, Maddie hears me say this a lot, is what I meant to say, but just because you get the revelation on Sunday doesn't mean the blessing and prophecy happens on Monday.
Right.
Right.
And so tell us, man, what was that like? You're doing ministry, and what was that downfall like?
So I'm doing ministry, and the whole time I'm like, I should not be doing this, because I know that I'm full
Wow,
of
so
sin.
you knew that.
I knew.
Wow.
I knew that I should not be doing it, but
Wow.
here I am. I have people's expectations on
Right.
me, and like I have 30 kids underneath me,
Right.
and I'm sitting here struggling with. So I'm falling back into using periodically, still hiding it. You know what I mean, smoking and I had the expectation of the church. You know what I mean. I was I couldn't just quit at that time. I
Right.
felt like I could not just give it up.
Right.
So I just continued on in my sin and continued in the ministry. And man, I hit rock bottom fast, Dylan.
Yeah.
So I had been getting a prophetic word from several people. Prophecies played a huge part in my life. I had been getting this word about me going back into the hog's pen.
Right.
And I didn't realize what that was. But I had a series of events hit me, and my best friend died. You know what I mean? My very best friend from childhood on up, that we was inseparable. He died. I'm full on back into using meth. You know what I mean? The church already knows now. You know what I mean? I've heard a lot of people. I ended up getting separated from my ex-wife and getting shot and going to prison all in a 6-month time. And
Just drugs, and that whole life
drugs
just kind of
come
came
back
over.
super. I'd never got rid of it completely while I was in the ministry, and I don't want to get too far off into that yet. I know that you asked me a question about. I was starting to go off on a rabbit trail.
Good.
She's asking me a
Well,
question.
just that downfall, and that was it, and you hit it perfectly. It seemed like you didn't have the spiritual roots.
I didn't have the roots, dude.
Drugs, and then all these things took place, and then your downfall. So what happened? Did you just not show up at the church one day, or did they fire you?
Dude.
What happened?
Dude, I was it was not a secret. I was lost, I lost 30, 40 pounds, you know what I mean? It was.
They knew you weren't spiritually fasting.
Yeah, but guess what, dude, and I got a DWI, bro. Why I was a youth pastor. I got my third DWI, which was a felony, and I got incarcerated. That's before all the, my wife leaving me and all that. And that's halfway in between the ministry. I kind of went ahead. I've missed that part, but that's when everything's come out to light. Okay, there's some issues going on here.
Right.
But dude, after I got out of jail, I got clean again, started walking process. I was in drug court, and here it is. I'm thrown back into ministry. like they're asking me to preach, you know,
Again.
Wow.
So
even
this wasn't
after
the
that.
first time. This is the second time.
So like this
Okay.
is the second time. Like
And were you and your wife separated?
no, we was
Still
together, but they're
Okay.
like, well, if you stay preaching, maybe you'll get away from everything. You'll stay
Wow.
away from it.
Wow.
Never really getting the roots of
Wow.
my issue. So I'm just constantly so I got the pressure of preaching, the pressure of leading, and here I am broken on the inside. And I think that you said something, do you think that people get thrown into leadership too soon? I think that everyone that is called to leadership should prove themselves worthy. They should prove show their accountability to it. They should show that their lives are ready for it before
Right.
they're ever even put
Right.
behind a pulpit.
James tells us that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it tells us that. And for me, my life never showed from the day one of me going into ministry that I was even equipped or ready. Yes, I had the voice. I had I could read the Bible. Like God give me interpretation of the Bible very quickly. I never read a Bible in my life, and I'm already having theological insight
Right.
very quickly, and I could preach a sermon. I could put one together. But my life was a broken mess on the inside, and here I am. I was embarrassed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I didn't know any other way out but to continue leading until I fell completely. And it was
I think it's important for us to talk about this too, because somebody might be listening to this and be like, say they're not a believer, and they're like, well, why would God allow someone like you in that setting, to be high and preach the word of God? And I think Romans 8:28, God will use it, all things for the,
Good.
work together for the good, right? And we don't understand it, but man, God can still use our brokenness within that, right? And it doesn't mean that there's not free will. It doesn't mean that, the church, is perfect,
Yeah.
right? But God still won out in your life. And so,
Right.
and God was aware. You weren't tricking God, but God said, okay, listen, I'm going to use this situation for the good, right? And here you are now, which we'll get to in a bit, but here we are now, and look at the reconciliation, look at the things you've learned. And even those sermons, even though you weren't in the right mindset, and your heart wasn't right, that's what's so amazing about our God.
Yeah.
He's not limited to that, because his
not
word
limited.
will never be returned and void. And even though you might not even be at the place where you should be, God's like, yeah, but watch this.
Right. Yeah.
There's a little kid right there who, boom, got saved that night. And that's God.
Yeah.
So rather
It
than
is.
saying, well, why would God allow that? Look at what God did.
Right. That's
right.
Doesn't mean that there wasn't human error involved, but it means that God's not confined to our own humanness. You know what I'm saying? I think that's powerful.
that's
just like,
powerful, man.
isn't that crazy knowing that God used us, right? Even when we were broken. And so there you were back into it again. And then what happened the second time around?
The second time around, dude, I was so the second time in, I felt like that, I truly felt like that I was done with drugs, you know what I mean? Like I was like, okay, I got a feeling I'm about to lose everything. I lost my job, my wife's ticked off, you know what I mean? Like I'm embarrassed because of the ministry, you know what I mean? Like everybody in the church now knows, everybody in the community knows that this youth pastor, went through this. And so I did well for about 6 months after that. And then I got that prophetic word, and like my life just immediately went, there wasn't no going into it. Like I went downhill fast, and I didn't even care. Like I went to a place where I didn't, like I knew God was real because I was cursing him, you know what I mean? But like
Right.
I went to a dark place very quickly. That second part of that ministry was it was rough, man.
Did you
was
just
rough.
eventually just stop going, or what
I
happened?
stopped going to church. Yeah, I stopped
was
going
it.
to church. I was tired of the conviction.
Right.
You know what I mean? I was still like, if I'm getting high, I'm going to get high. And that's where I
Right.
went back into my mentality. Like, I'm done hiding this. I'm embarrassed already. You know what I mean? Like, I'm here. You know what I mean? Like, there wasn't no hiding that I needed help.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then you guys just eventually separated.
We
you and your
separated,
wife.
yeah, and that was good. Like I know that was what was supposed to happen. You know what I mean? Now, like at that time, dude, I was mad.
Yeah.
I was mad at God. I was mad at myself. I was mad at her. And I was broken, dude.
Yeah.
I was broken, but I learned a while. I was in, like you said, God uses all things for the good. Like that give me, like me seeing that God used me even in my brokenness. And, let's be honest, there's people out there today, just because you're not using drugs, there's hidden sin in people's life,
That's right.
pornography.
Yeah.
There's just a lot
Anything.
of hidden things in pastors today that they're probably struggling with. There's a lot of them out there that's struggling, and they're still being used.
Right.
There's
It's
still,
true.
no sin's greater than the other. My sin was just one of the ones that was very evident,
Right.
and you couldn't hide it, you couldn't contain it. You know what I mean? Of course, you go from 200 pounds to 150. That's that's noticeable, and I think that God showed me that. While he gave me them times in ministry to prepare me for what was next. So, I ended up going to prison with a broken leg, got shot by my bail's bondsman. So that happened on the 13th of June, 3 years ago. So almost 3 years ago,
Wow.
I got shot and got sent to prison for my first time in a wheelchair.
So there you are.
Wow.
Yeah.
In prison. You're reflecting back on your life, I'm sure. Man, I was just a 12-year-old kid smoking a joint. I'm a 14-year-old shooting up or using meth.
Shooting meth.
Right.
15 years old.
15 years old. Get saved. Been in the ministry. Got locked up. Been in the ministry. Got married. Separated. Just got shot. There ain't no wake-up call more than getting shot. I'm gonna assume. I can't say that first-hand
Probably.
experience.
Yeah.
There you are, bro.
So
Broken.
dude,
What's your
prison was a
mindset?
blessing to me. Like I was like, so on the process of going to prison, like I'm stuck in this prison cell in a wheelchair, having other prisoners push me around. I'm stuck in jail. I'm going to court, and I'm like, I'm in there for something that really I should be going home for. But I knew that God had me there. Like there was no denying it. I was angry at God for it, but I finally come to the place. I started praying again, Dylan, and I prayed. I said, Lord, if it's your will for me to go to prison, I accept that. And I went to court that morning, and they was like, you're going to prison. And I'm like, okay. So I get to prison, and here I am. I had lots of, look, I'm a little nervous talking about it. I had lots of emotions, lots of thoughts running in my head. Here I am. Don't know if I'm ever going to walk again. When I got shot, it took 1.5 inches out of my femoral bone. So, I got rods and pins. I shot. My best friend just died. My wife left me.
Right.
I'm stuck in prison. My family, I can't get a hold of. They don't want nothing to do with me. And I'm literally, it's just me and God. And I begin to pray in that place, man. And I did not know, I did not realize that what God was preparing me for while I was in prison. But God had a plan, and he was going to use all the old times in ministry. Well, I was sitting in prison, man, one night, and I remember very distinctly, this is my whole thought process changed. Everything changed for me in that moment. I began to live in joy again, happiness again, and I began to pray. But anyways, God reminded me of a story I'd heard about a shepherd and a sheep. What a shepherd does. This is a cool story, guys. It's what a shepherd does. He'll tend to a sheep. He has a sheep in the pen. You know what I mean? And every once in a while, you'll have them couple honor sheep, one of them honor sheeps that'll get out of the pen, and it'll go out and it'll venture out, and it's potentially in ways of harm. Has harm maybe going to come at him and stuff like that. Well, that shepherd that loves his sheep will go out there and get that sheep and bring it back. Well, that same sheep keeps wandering out, and he'll keep bringing it back. Well, anyways, eventually, this is really what a shepherd will do. The shepherd will go out there, find that sheep, and eventually it'll break its legs, and it'll teach it to come back to the fold and teach that sheep how to listen to his voice again, how to stay in his boundaries, how to eat again. And God spoke to me this night. He said, Austin, I could no longer spiritually break you. I had to physically break your legs to teach you to depend on me again. And in that moment, I feel the Holy Spirit right now, in that moment, everything changed for me. I was like, okay, you're teaching me. This is a lesson.
We go back to Old Testament, wrestling with God,
wrestling with God.
And then here we are in the New Testament, and the sheep know my voice, right? And it's just at that point in time, what I love about it, and I felt this came to me, you're in prison, right? A personal prison.
Yeah.
But also actual prison.
Yeah.
Right? and you're getting pushed around by prisoners. That's kind of hilarious. That's hilarious.
They're racing with me. You know what I'm saying? They're having race wars with me.
It's hilarious physically and actually, but man, also like figuratively.
Yeah.
You're in prison and getting pushed around by prisoners in a wheelchair. Completely dependent.
Right.
Yeah.
Completely dependent,
Yeah.
And then going back to your analogy there, that's where God's able just to come in and do whatever he needs to because we're completely dependent, right?
Yeah.
At that point in time, God is God and I am not. We would never say I am God.
Yeah.
I mean, some people do, but we realize we're not God.
Yeah.
But we oftentimes live as if we are God. And at that moment, I just feel like that was a place where you're like, God, I'm no longer God.
Right.
Yeah.
You're God.
God. Yeah.
I'm not worried about preaching, not worried about anything. I'm just ready to be a Christian.
Right.
And just to be your son. And I think you always wanting that love, that affirmation from your earthly father, and your mother. At that point in time, you get the affirmation from the heavenly Father. It changes everything. At least I know it did for me, and I know it did for you. Where at that point in time, when you know that you're a child of God, dude, there's nothing like it. It breaks you. It's not about rules and regulations. I wasn't scared of anybody, or anything. But when I got the love of the Father, it changed everything. And it sounds, I know the same with you. And I think that's what's so cool is because you hear your whole story, and then at that point in time, you get out, then you go to rehab or you go to New Beginnings, right? And obviously, I want you to tell about that. But I just think that's so powerful for people to hear. Like, it took a lot for you to get there.
Yeah.
Granted, people, and I don't know your thought on this, but I believe a lot of people say, "Well, God, everything happens for a reason." Yeah, sometimes we just have free will and we're idiots.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I don't think God did this or God did that. Our own sinful action did that.
Yeah.
However, going back to Romans 8:28, He uses
Powerful.
it. And so tell me, you get out of prison, you're going to rehab. What's your mindset? Is God still at the forefront?
I don't want to pass up a very, very important part of that prison journey.
Yeah.
So, I was so comfortable in my sin. I was comfortable where I was at. I was even comfortable in prison because the place that I was at, I had so many people I knew that was in there. Like I had cousins and friends that was in there. So
Family
it
reunion.
wasn't that hard, but God changed everything up for me. He's like, and he moved me because I'm in a wheelchair. He moved me to a prison camp. Well, I got moved to a prison camp that I knew nobody at. Here I am in a wheelchair. I'm not having people push me around that I don't. I literally knew nobody in this camp they sent me to. And God moved me out of my comfort zone, and he started putting the pressure on me. Well, while I was there, Dylan, I began preaching, having Bible studies, preaching, and I had the privilege to lead 13 people to the Lord while I was in prison.
Wow.
Yeah. And I, had prayer group in there. I made a big impact while I was there. You know what I mean? I wasn't there long, but I was there long enough to make an impact on people's lives.
Yeah.
And
That's awesome, man.
That's amazing.
Going on, I didn't want to leave that
No,
out because
Yeah.
God was
It's good.
preparing me.
Yeah.
He used.
Put you in the pit.
Yeah, I was in the pit. Yeah. I was back in the hog's pen,
Yeah.
and So, anyways, God was preparing me. He was using all that, even though, in them early preaching moments, the youth ministry moments that I was being taught how to preach the word. God was using it for the next step. Preparing me. Yeah, it wasn't very successful, but he was putting me into a place of success. Come on now, I'm in prison and 13 people find the Lord. You know what I mean? And we're talking about all different kind of people that was beating their wives in there for that. Homosexuals. You know what I mean? People that just from all different kinds of backgrounds are being saved. But anyways, I ended up getting out of prison. While I was in prison, I had got a word from, I think it was from somebody that's like, I feel like you're going to go west. Go west. I'm like, okay, west. All right. So
There you go.
Yeah. So when I get out of prison, I go back home to my mom's and my dad's. I'm staying with both of them. They're glad that I'm back home. Over that time that I was in there, our relationships started getting better. Started building again. Well, I go back home. Bad choice. It was I ended up using within the first day. I was drinking. I went to the Mexican restaurant and got drunk, I was drinking the first day out of prison. Even after all that time, in prison and stuff like that, I still went back and started using. My PO, I started using meth again, and I ended up going to rehab. And my PO was like, "You got to do something, or we're sending you back to prison." I'm like, I can't even walk. I'm not going back to prison, Like I'm still in still in crutches and stuff like that. I'm like, I need to do something, Austin. You got to do something. And I always use this excuse. Well, maybe there's going to be restoration for my marriage, and I'm not going to go till something. Well, while I was in rehab, I got served with divorce papers, and I was like, that's my cue right there. Well, also while I was in rehab, they mentioned about CORE, the recovery program, CORE. And it was Southwest Missouri. And anyways, I ended up going to CORE, and I was there I met Angie, like my first week there, you know what I mean? I'm limping up the steps, moving furniture with them, you know what I mean?
That's hilarious.
Funny.
But I met her there, and anyways, I go to CORE. My life, dude, I started getting structure back, started getting my happiness back, you know what I mean? Started living life a little bit, working again, I'm out of my old area, you know what I mean? I don't have that weight. But there was one thing lacking, God was not in my life. Like I wasn't praying, I was still smoking, still, messing with the women, just so much stuff was still, wrong with me. And I wasn't really taking full advantage of my time at the CORE program. And I ended up relapsing again, Dylan, again, like probably I couldn't even count 100 sometimes, something crazy.
Right.
And anyways, I go, my PO's like, they arrest me. Like, I had a bad experience. I'm not going to go into details, but I had a bad experience on meth, that relapse. And wasn't very long, about a week or so relapse. And I get arrested for my last time on August the night Redemption launched. Redemption, I was my last night in jail, the night that launched.
Wow.
And I went to jail, and my PO come in there about 5 days later and it's like, look, you got to go to rehab. I'm like, I just got out of prison. I didn't really want to go, but I went, and they sent me to Springfield. Well, I'm kicked out of CORE program. Here I am in, this rehab up here. My clothes, everything that I own, my work tools, everything I own got stole while I was in jail. Like literally everything. And anyways, I'm here in this rehab in Springfield, Missouri, and they mentioned something about new beginnings, and that's when after I got out, I was like, hey, I need somewhere to go, and they welcomed me right in, man. And I come to New Beginnings, and they're in Springfield on State Street, right down the road from the downtown campus, the Well. And I go in there. I eventually soon start leading that house that I was in. I mean, very quickly, like the leadership in me just started coming out. 3 months in, I'm leading this home. Anyways, one of the stipulations was you had to go to this redemption service on Friday nights at the Well. And I'm like, oh, great. My Friday nights got a church service.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But like, dude, my first night there, dude, like I experienced something, I felt something that I never felt before in my life. Like it felt perfect. It felt right. I felt loved. Matter of fact, I think Pastor Celine was there, and like she hugged me. It's like, I like the lead pastor hugged me. You know what I'm saying? Like I felt like that was awesome. You know what I mean? Like, and
family,
family. I felt it. You know what I mean? And I felt like I belonged. And that's when my journey with you guys started. You know what I mean?
And then you're there, and I think that's kind of where it goes to when I ended up seeing you at Redemption. And then you just were faithful. Little by little, and I think that's important for my point of view. You're in prison, you start leading, you get right back on drugs.
Yeah.
You're at New Beginnings, you start leading, and then eventually you find yourself at Redemption, and the Lord really starts to use you. I think God's hand has always been upon you. That calling's always been upon you. But man, you've gotten ahead of yourself a little bit, or you've gotten distracted.
Yeah.
And I think this past, what's it been now?
It's almost 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah. Right.
You've been faithful, man.
Yeah.
You haven't relapsed. You haven't went back. I think God had to humble you and shut you up. You know what I'm saying? He shuts us all up.
Yeah.
But sometimes you need to shut up a little bit more. Like, Dylan, just shut up.
Yeah.
Austin, just shut up. You know what I'm saying? That's the sermon right there. Just shut up, right? But man, it wasn't easy though, was it?
No.
Man, you felt overlooked maybe. You felt down. You felt, man, I can do this. But man, I think all of a sudden when when you've humbled yourself for that long and God begins to use you, here, and I don't want to speak for you, but I know, oh God, I wish I was here. And then all of a sudden he puts you there and you're like, oh crap. Am I ready now? Right.
Yeah.
And so, but he wouldn't have trusted you, with certain things if you weren't going through the hoops, if you weren't, just being refined. And I think that's what's so amazing here. You've been sober 2 years, man. You've been wiping down those tables forever, right?
Yeah.
But then, man, you got a job. And God's blessed you there. You've been able to have structure in your life.
Yeah.
You've been a man of prayer. You've been on the leadership team. And now, as of recent, and this is new news for a lot of people, I'm sure, but, kind of tell them, where you're at with redemption now. It's funny.
Yeah.
You found God just spoke to you in a whole new way in redemption, and now what?
Yeah, man. So, like, I wouldn't say that it was my first time. Like, if, we have one of our videos that me and Brandon did when he was passing. So, I'm the new redemption outreach minister at the Well.
Wow.
Now,
Isn't that
it's
ironic?
crazy.
Only God.
Irony, right?
Yeah,
Seriously.
spiritual irony. So, like, my last night of physically being incarcerated, the redemption ministry was being launched.
That's crazy.
And now here you are.
Like,
leading.
God was
Wow.
calling me. He's like, Austin, you're
Yeah.
on your path to redemption.
Isn't that good?
Yeah,
But
it's
man,
so
isn't
good.
Isn't it good? Because people don't know because they weren't there. I mean, some were there, but you hear this, and hear me out. You tell your whole story. Some people might say, Austin, every time you've been put in a leadership position, it hasn't been good.
Yeah.
I have my input on that, and I have my theory. But somebody who doesn't know you, what would you say is different now? And why do you think that you're at a place where you can lead?
So this is my theory. So this is the truth. This is reality of my life. Is that Austin never walked process. Austin always had everything handed, Dylan. Everything handed, Maddie, was always given to me because I could speak, because I did look good, because I did have the suave talk. You know what I mean? I was, sexy Steve, and everything was always handed to me. So for the very first time in my life, I actually wanted to walk process out. Like you would be up there preaching on Sunday mornings talking about this process, You're
like,
I'm
shut
like, so like I didn't even understand the concept of process.
Right.
Like I didn't even understand it, and like I had the opportunity to walk through the hoops. Like Pastor Selena even was like, dude, like when she first met me, her and John was up there, and I guess she heard me praying. She come up to me after service. She's like, "Are you a preacher or something?"
Right.
I'm like, well,
Yeah.
She's like, and basically, they was like, well, you ain't just gonna get a mic here, and like I knew then at that moment that I was in a good place, like,
But
and I didn't.
we
want
loved
that.
you.
Yes,
Yeah.
you loved me, man.
We weren't threatened. It was like,
No.
that dude has a calling. We acknowledge the calling, but there's a process.
You protected me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I was protected in this place. It wasn't like, dude, you're not going to have to be embarrassed again. You're not going to have to be broken or hurt other people anymore. You're going to walk through process. And I did. I walked through the, scrubbing the toilets down, wiping the tables down while God was speaking powerful words to me. I was, being discipled in the word. I was learning how to pray. Like obviously I knew how to pray coming to, I knew how to pray
Spiritual
somewhat,
growth,
but
though.
I got to grow. Like I didn't have the weight of, you got to preach now.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? I was able to work on Austin. I was able to identify with the issues in my life. I was able to identify with the things that broke me, that left me in that dark place that I ended up in. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, you're calling me, God, and I never want to go back to where I was.
Right.
I never want to go back to where I was. Never going back. You know what I mean?
Somebody should write a book about that,
Yeah,
right?
somebody should.
I know. But dude, I'm proud of you, man.
Yeah.
Like I hope you know that. And dude, you're you're about to get married. You're already leading in redemption. But man, how old are you now?
I'll be 32 in September.
32.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what's amazing? And nothing against this age. You're not 70. You're not
Right.
80. You got this whole life ahead of you. The
Right.
Bible
Yeah.
talks about restoring the year. The Lord restored the years that the locusts have eaten.
Yes, he did.
You got
He
a
is.
whole nother ball game. It ain't how you start; it's how you finish.
It's how you
know.
finish.
And dude, I'm just so excited for you.
Yeah.
And I know I've already watched you in my own kitchen over here help lead one of my best friends back to the Lord. You got
Yeah.
him in rehab, and I'm like, there ain't no better person to have on my side than Austin when it comes to recovery and all that, because you've been there, done that. But man, you're not proud of what you've done. You're proud of what God's done in you and how He's restored you, you know? And I just think it's amazing to see who you are today, you know? And I can't wait to see what, you know, is going forward for you in the future.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I've never heard, obviously I've known you these past 2 years, but I've never heard the whole story before. I mean, any of it. And so, man, it was incredible. But I want to ask you if you could leave one thing with people who have struggled with trying to be in the ministry, but also, and it doesn't have to be drugs, but people are stuck. Like they have these addictions in their life and they're either hidden or they're trying to run away from them and they're trying to do what the Lord's called them to do. Like, what is the one advice that you would give them?
It's good.
Man, obviously it's process, like being honest with yourself and identifying what is wrong in your heart and in your, you know, thought process, identifying with it and walking through the process of fixing it. You know, often we have the pressures of this world, and you know, with them pressures we feel forced to move forward without taking the time and trusting God in it. And I just think that, you know, if we follow the process of waiting on God, asking God, seeking God, and trusting in Him, then He's going to help us through them times that you know that we're going through. You know?
Right.
So.
Yeah, dude.
That's awesome.
I love it. You're about to get married. When?
About to get married
When?
September 26th.
Come on, man.
Awesome.
To Dasha,
I'm
you know.
pumped to sing at your wedding.
Yeah,
they asked
Madi
me and I'm
gets to
so
sing,
excited.
yeah.
Dude,
Yeah,
so excited
she's
for
a
you.
beautiful, amazing young woman.
She's
She
amazing.
has changed my life. You know, she's
Yeah.
brought. Let's be honest. You know what I mean? Like I was, you know, God knew that I was getting called into ministry and knew that I was going to be on the platform. And God's like, I can't have you up there with your mind wondering who's watching you. You
Right.
know? So He put Dasha in my life.
Yeah.
Man.
She's got a strong personality.
She's
so
strong.
She
Oh,
does.
yeah.
She
Yeah.
will. Yeah.
Yeah, she's honoring, man.
I
And
love
I love it, dude. I
love
love it.
She's awesome.
Dude, we love you, man.
Yeah.
And it's a
We
blessing
do.
to have you here today. And I can't wait to look from afar and up close both and be like, dude,
Yeah.
you're doing it. You know what I'm saying? And because you went through the hoops, you know, and dude, God's about to use you in ways you can't imagine. But you got to stay humble and hungry, which you know that now.
Yeah.
But man, I always tell people, I probably said it every episode, you know, you got to stay as desperate for God on your good days as you do your bad. They're like, you mean you're bad? Nope. Because even atheists on their bad days, oh God, please help me. But it's on your good days where you're like, I'm feeling good.
Right.
You got to stay humble.
Right.
And dude, and you've got it, man. And
Hey, can I mention something
Yeah.
about my parents?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I got to tell, like, I just felt the spirit
Yeah.
right then. You know, like, you know, I told a lot about, you know, the addictions
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
have and stuff like that. But my mom's clean. My dad is doing well.
awesome.
You know, my mom has an awesome husband that's been, I mean, completely supportive and,
Right.
you know, has helped change her life.
Right.
And my dad, you know, he is doing well for himself. And, you know, life is good for us all
That's
now.
awesome.
breaking those generational
Generational curses
Now
have
it's
been broke.
blessings.
Yeah.
Amen. Well, dude, we love you and we're proud of you.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see what God does. You know what I'm saying?
Amen.
Love you, man.
Love you.
Make sure to subscribe to this channel so that these episodes are sent to you each month, along with our Life and Leadership podcast that shares content about the behind the scenes in our own lives and also talk about various leadership principles that we found to be beneficial in our own life and ministry.
Also, check out our midweek message and worship podcast that's released every Thursday. Thanks for hanging out with us.